On February 17, 2009, a man was discovered lifeless in a dimly lit room of the Ramses Hilton Hotel in central Cairo. That man was Ahmed Khaaki, a clandestine Hamas operative, accused of masterminding missile smuggling pipelines across the Sinai. His death immediately raised questions that Cairo was unprepared to answer. Hotel staff recalled nothing unusual that evening, only a man who checked in alone, carrying a worn leather briefcase and moving with quiet precision. Security footage showed him walking the marble lobby at 9:42 p.m., unaware that hidden eyes had already marked his every step. Egyptian police entered the scene to find the curtains drawn, the minibar untouched, and the air unnervingly still. Khaaki lay on the bed fully clothed, his face strangely serene. The first report claimed heart failure, but whispers in the corridors spoke otherwise. This was no ordinary guest. Khaaki's name had traveled across intelligence circles from Tel Aviv to Langley. He was the architect of secret supply lines, the man who turned desert highways into arteries of war. His death was never going to be considered natural. By dawn, Cairo buzzed with speculation. Had Mossad finally reached into Egypt's beating heart to silence a ghost? Or had rivals within Hamas settled scores in a foreign capital? Every rumor poured gasoline on a fire of paranoia. News agencies caught wind within hours. Headlines clashed. Businessman dies in hotel beside terrorist mastermind found dead. What happened inside that locked hotel room would ripple across continents, igniting shadows where nations wage wars unseen. Ahmed Khaaki was no ordinary smuggler. He was the quiet architect of a weapons highway, linking Iranian factories to Gaza's tunnels. Through his roots flowed the rockets that could change battlefield equations overnight. His death was not simply personal, it was geopolitical. Every missile he moved across Sinai threatened to ignite a wider regional war. Israeli officials knew his work intimately, counting each shipment like a countdown to catastrophe. For them, his continued survival was not tolerable. His death was almost inevitable. Egypt stood at the crossroads. Hosting Khaaki on its soil was already a dangerous embarrassment. Cairo, torn between regional diplomacy and internal security, suddenly faced the chilling reality. Its territory had become the silent stage for a foreign assassination. Across the Mediterranean, in secret chambers, intelligence chiefs took careful notes. NATO analysts tracked signals. Iranian couriers asked questions. American satellites scoured Cairo skies for anomalies. Each player in this chess match wondered who moved the piece that toppled Khaaki. The world of espionage is allergic to accidents. When a man of Khaaki's importance collapses alone in a luxury hotel, the assumption is not nature, it is operation. And if it was operation, the scale of risk was enormous. For if Mossad truly orchestrated this inside Egypt, it meant Tel Aviv was extending a long arm through sovereign borders. And if Hamas or Iranian proxies did it, then Cairo had become a killing ground where alliances fractured and shadows feasted. Who ordered the death of Ahmed Khaaki in that Cairo hotel? Was it the long reach of Mossad, erasing a man who fed rockets into Gaza? Or was it an internal betrayal, a knife hidden inside Hamas's own cloak? Why did it happen on that night, in that room, in a city already bristling with competing intelligence services? Was it chance? Or was it the calculated climax of years of surveillance, informants, and intercepted phone calls whispering his itinerary? Could Egyptian authorities have known, or were they blindsided by an operation unfolding beneath their watch? Did local security services quietly collaborate, or did they awaken to the humiliation of discovering a corpse in their capital, planted like a riddle? And what message was truly being sent? Was Khaaki silenced to protect civilians from incoming rockets, or to warn others in the smuggling chain that no hotel door, no border, and no disguise could save them from an invisible hand? In the cold neon glow of Cairo, the questions multiplied. Who killed him? Why then? And most haunting of all, if his life ended with such precision, how many others were already marked for the same fate? Ahmed Khaaki was born in 1968 in the crowded lanes of Rafah, a border town forever caught between maps and ambitions. His family belonged to the working poor, survivors of displacement, their household stitched together by resilience and whispers of loss. His father, a construction worker, labored under scorching sun to feed 7 children. His mother, a schoolteacher, filled evenings with tales of Palestine's history. In those stories, Ahmed absorbed both sorrow and pride, seeds that would later grow into defiance. Rafah was no ordinary town. It was a junction of tunnels, borders, checkpoints, and soldiers. Children learned to navigate watchtowers as easily as alleyways. Ahmed's early playground was already a battlefield of shadows, each day rehearsing the language of survival. He proved studious, a boy who devoured mathematics and geography with equal hunger. Teachers remembered a sharp mind cloaked in silence, rarely speaking out of turn. He excelled at maps, tracing borders with precision, perhaps foreshadowing the routes he would someday carve. But poverty weighed heavily. School notebooks doubled as grocery lists, and textbooks carried the faint smell of kerosene lamps. Ahmed's ambition was not born in classrooms. It was forged at night, under flickering bulbs, while listening to gunfire echo across the border. In his teenage years, Israeli patrols frequently searched homes in Rafah. Once, soldiers stormed his family house, overturning furniture. Ahmed watched his mother's eyes burn with humiliation. That moment, relatives would recall, marked a change. The quiet boy hardened into someone less forgiving. By 17, he was already trusted to deliver messages between older cousins tied to underground groups. He rode battered bicycles through checkpoints, feigning innocence, while carrying folded papers that spoke of meetings, weapons, and codes of secrecy. Yet Ahmed also showed a softer side. He adored his youngest sister, crafting wooden toys from scraps. Neighbors remembered him teaching children how to fly paper kites above rooftops, moments of levity that seemed to mock the grimness of Rafah's streets. The first intifada erupted when Ahmed was 19. The stones, tear gas, and funerals became the new curriculum. Friends either joined protests or funerary processions. For Ahmed, this uprising was not a choice. It was the environment that baptized his adulthood. By his early 20s, he was no longer just another youth in Rafah. He was a man shaped by poverty, invasion, and defiance. The boy who once solved geography puzzles was now mapping routes that would outmaneuver both soldiers and borders. Ahmed Khaaki's ideology was born from fire and occupation. He believed the struggle was not temporary but generational, that each family owed blood to history. His rhetoric, even in youth, reflected fatalism mixed with a strategist's cold arithmetic of conflict. He read deeply from pamphlets circulating clandestinely in Gaza. While many were poetic manifestos, Ahmed was drawn to technical writings, manuals on logistics, essays on military supply, treatises on resistance infrastructure. He saw ideology not as emotion, but as engineering. Unlike fiery preachers, he rarely raised his voice. Instead, he cultivated an aura of calculation. When others argued passionately, Ahmed would listen silently, then deliver a single-pointed remark that cut through noise. His comrades nicknamed this habit the scalpel. In private, he was methodical to the point of obsession. He carried small notebooks filled with numbers, diagrams, and tunnel sketches. Some described his handwriting as military neatness, each line pressed like rails, suggesting his mind ran always on schedules. But quirks softened his severity. He had an unusual fondness for Turkish coffee, brewed thick and bitter. Companions claimed he could not plan a meeting without it. Cigarettes, however, he despised, often waving smoke away with an almost comic annoyance. Animals fascinated him. He raised pigeons on the rooftop of his family house, admiring their flight patterns. He claimed watching their return sharpened his thinking about routes, borders, and timing. What began as a hobby became an allegory for his craft. Despite seriousness, humor occasionally cracked through. He enjoyed mimicry, imitating Egyptian border guards with uncanny precision, drawing laughter from tense gatherings. It was this unexpected humor that disarmed allies and masked the dangerous patience that made him formidable. Ahmed's ideology was ironclad, but it was paired with idiosyncrasies, coffee, pigeons, mimicry, that gave him depth. These quirks made him human, yet they also concealed the disciplined architect of smuggling networks that would eventually shape battles far beyond Rafah. In militant circles, Ahmed Khaaki earned many names. Some called him Al-Tariq, meaning the route, for his mastery of moving weapons across impossible borders. Others preferred the merchant, a nod to his ability to cloak contraband as ordinary trade goods. Within his family, however, he was affectionately called Abu Hammam, after his rooftop pigeons. Neighbors chuckled at the nickname, never suspecting that this gentle title masked the architect of supply chains fueling rocket fire into Israel. Duality defined his existence. He cultivated his self-image carefully. In photographs, he often appeared unsmiling, dressed plainly in worn jackets. He wanted to appear forgettable, another face in a crowd. To Ahmed, invisibility was not weakness, it was the ultimate shield. Yet he privately saw himself as a strategist, almost a general without a uniform. Friends recalled his habit of quoting ancient proverbs about patience and distance. "The longest road is the safest road," he once told a confidant, sketching maps on napkins. This blend of humility and grandiosity made him enigmatic. Was he a humble courier or a visionary logistician? Khaaki seemed to enjoy the uncertainty, wearing his nicknames like masks, each one hiding and revealing different facets of his carefully curated myth. By the early 1990s, Ahmed Khaaki had moved beyond errands and whispers. The Oslo Accords loomed, dividing opinions in Rafah. To Ahmed, the talks felt hollow, a stage show ignoring ground realities. He decided his battlefield would not be negotiation rooms. He first attached himself to grassroots committees that distributed food, medicine, and leaflets. Outwardly charitable, these networks doubled as political incubators. They hardened his sense that power lay not in speeches, but in invisible logistics beneath official radar. Israeli crackdowns intensified. Arrests, raids, checkpoints turned life into a maze. Ahmed proved invaluable as a problem solver, rerouting supply chains when roads were blocked. His knack for improvisation under pressure made senior militants take serious notice of him. Hamas recruiters eventually sought him out. He was not the loudest ideologue, but he possessed something rarer: discipline and patience. In meetings, he spoke of caravans, tunnels, and coded schedules. His language was less about resistance slogans, more about infrastructure and longevity. By the mid-1990s, he was trusted with money transfers, arranging couriers from Cairo to Gaza. While others flaunted weapons, Ahmed tracked spreadsheets, receipts, and shipments. It was dull work to outsiders, yet it formed the backbone of insurgent sustainability. His low profile shielded him from immediate targeting. Egyptian intelligence noted his comings and goings but underestimated his role, dismissing him as another courier. This invisibility allowed him to build deeper contacts, particularly among Bedouin smugglers who commanded Sinai's secret passageways. For Ahmed, militancy was never about glamour. It was about patience, infrastructure, and inevitability. He saw himself as the invisible artery that nourished louder actors. Without men like him, he argued, the rockets and rifles would simply gather dust. Thus the boy from Rafah completed his metamorphosis. No longer just Abu Hammam with pigeons, but the architect of clandestine highways. His transition into militancy was quiet, precise, and, for his enemies, dangerously effective. The story of Ahmed Khaaki unfolded against a backdrop already dripping with history and blood. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict was no isolated quarrel. It was a century-old contest of identity, land, and sovereignty. Every generation inherited scars, and every scar hardened new resolve. By the 1980s and 1990s, Gaza was an open-air prison, fenced, monitored, and patrolled. Daily humiliations bred resistance, while each Israeli incursion fueled militant recruitment. It was within this crucible that networks like Hamas gained momentum, projecting themselves as guardians of dignity. Israel viewed Hamas not merely as adversaries, but existential threats. The group's charter, filled with uncompromising vows, left little room for coexistence. Each rocket strike was framed not as harassment, but as proof of an unending campaign against the state's survival. The First Intifada lit the fuse. Stone-throwing youth clashed with armed soldiers, scenes broadcast globally. What seemed symbolic in early days hardened into militancy. Secret supply chains, forged in alleys and tunnels, expanded into lifelines for weapons, money, and ideological texts. Meanwhile, regional wars deepened the theater. The Iran-Iraq War spilled influence into the Levant, with Tehran eager to export revolutionary fire. By the mid-1990s, Iran was no longer distant. It was a benefactor, injecting funds and weapons into Gaza's veins. Sinai became a corridor of chaos. Egyptian crackdowns chased smugglers, but desert tribes exploited their knowledge of shifting sands. It was here that Ahmed Khaaki thrived, turning geography into arsenal. His tunnels mirrored ancient caravan routes, but instead of spices, they carried missiles. Every escalation had echoes. When Israel struck Lebanon, Gaza responded. When Palestinian leaders fell to assassinations, new figures rose hardened. The conflict was less linear war, more recursive storm, where each move guaranteed retaliation, breeding cycles beyond conventional diplomacy's reach. Global powers hovered constantly. The United States funneled billions into Israel's defense, while European states debated aid versus censure. Russia, meanwhile, played both sides, whispering to Damascus while courting Tel Aviv. Each capital viewed Gaza not just locally, but as leverage in larger games. By the 2000s, the conflict resembled not two adversaries but entire ecosystems colliding. Rockets, drones, bulldozers, and tunnels formed their own vocabulary. Into this lexicon stepped men like Khaaki, whose value was measured in how seamlessly they supplied the language of violence. Thus, Khaaki was not merely a man in Rafah. He was an actor inside a generational conflict, a cog in a machinery larger than any nation, and his death would inevitably ripple across these vast, combustible landscapes. Israel's position was unambiguous: eliminate threats before they matured. To Tel Aviv, figures like Ahmed Khaaki represented not mere smugglers, but architects of existential danger. The policy was preventative warfare, striking supply chains abroad before rockets rained on Ashkelon or Tel Aviv. Egypt played a tortured balancing act. Publicly, Cairo positioned itself as mediator, hosting peace talks. Privately, it waged a cat-and-mouse game with smugglers in Sinai. Yet corruption, tribal loyalties, and porous borders meant Egypt's control was always partial, always vulnerable. Iran stood as benefactor and ideological sponsor. Tehran supplied training, money, and technology, seeing Gaza as a pressure valve against Israel. Supporting militants like Khaaki allowed Iran to extend its influence westward, projecting power far beyond its immediate neighborhood. The Gulf states were fractured in their stance. Qatar extended rhetorical and financial support, branding it humanitarian aid. Saudi Arabia, wary of Iranian expansion, hesitated. The Emirates leaned toward Israel quietly, preferring commerce and technology to entanglement in endless regional wars. The United States anchored firmly behind Israel. Washington provided weapons, intelligence, and political cover. American drones watched the Sinai sky, sometimes spotting Khaaki's convoys, yet the ultimate decision to strike was often handed discreetly to Israel's shadowy operatives. Europe's position oscillated. Some states condemned Israeli assassinations, branding them extrajudicial killings. Others quietly applauded the removal of militant threats. Aid convoys to Gaza became symbolic battlegrounds, as activists and diplomats clashed over whether relief sustained civilians or empowered militants. Jordan, sharing borders and refugees, walked a delicate path. It feared spillover violence, yet it could not openly embrace Hamas without angering Israel or the United States. Its intelligence services monitored every whisper, every smuggler, wary of instability spilling into Amman. Syria, still entangled in its own disputes with Israel, allowed Hamas offices in Damascus. This sanctuary was strategic, a bargaining chip, but it placed Khaaki in a wider web where Syrian intelligence occasionally intersected with his roots. Geography became politics incarnate. Turkey emerged later as a vocal critic of Israeli policies, providing diplomatic oxygen to Hamas. Yet its actions stopped short of outright confrontation. Ankara's rhetoric amplified Gaza's plight, while its intelligence watched carefully, measuring when involvement suited national interests. Thus, Ahmed Khaaki was not simply a Palestinian smuggler. He was a node in an international network of agendas, where every country's position shifted like sand dunes. His existence, and eventual elimination, reflected a conflict woven through capitals, not just camps. Ahmed Khaaki mattered because he was the invisible artery behind Hamas's firepower. Leaders could rally crowds, fighters could launch rockets, But without men like him ensuring supply, the grand gestures of militancy would crumble into slogans without ammunition. Logistics was destiny. Unlike many militants, Khaaki thrived in obscurity. He avoided cameras, rarely spoke in rallies, and shunned ceremonial roles. This made him harder to trace. For intelligence agencies, he was not a headline threat. He was a silent one, infinitely more dangerous. Khaaki bridged worlds. He spoke the language of Rafah's street hustlers, but also navigated Cairo's financial networks and Tehran's emissaries. Few could move comfortably from dusty tunnels to polished hotel lobbies. That versatility made him indispensable to Hamas's long-term sustainability. Every missile that reached Gaza through Sinai bore his fingerprint. Israeli intelligence mapped trajectories back to his contacts. They understood. Eliminate one courier, the chain adapts. But eliminate Khaaki, the architect, and entire arteries collapse. He was not expendable. He was central. He also represented proof of concept. His success showed that Gaza's blockade was permeable, that no wall could truly seal off resistance. For Palestinians, his work symbolized defiance. For Israelis, it symbolized a strategic nightmare that needed surgical resolution. Egypt's interest in him was equally sharp. His operations embarrassed Cairo, undermining its sovereignty. Smuggling suggested Egypt was porous, weak. Each of his successful shipments humiliated their border guards. His elimination, even if foreign hands performed it, was quietly welcomed in some circles. For Iran, Khaaki was a loyal vessel. He transformed Tehran's blueprints into reality, ensuring their influence flowed westward. Every shipment validated their regional strategy. In him, they saw not just a courier, but an extension of their ideological and military reach. His myth also mattered. Stories spread of his calmness under pursuit, his ability to vanish at checkpoints, his endless patience. Such legends inspired younger recruits. In asymmetric wars, myth is as valuable as material. Khaaki supplied both. For Mossad, Khaaki was a perfect target. Operationally vital, politically quiet, geographically reachable. He embodied the kind of adversary that justified covert budgets and elaborate operations. Eliminating him would serve not only tactical goals, but also strategic theater. Thus, the death of Ahmed Khaaki was never a small matter. He was not merely one man lost in Cairo. He was a keystone in a volatile arch, and when removed, the balance of forces shifted across the entire Middle East. Ahmed Khaaki's first brush with the law came in 1992, when Egyptian border police detained him near El Arish. Officially, he was carrying textiles. Unofficially, the crates concealed communication devices bound for Gaza. The shipment was confiscated, but Ahmed was released. That release was not mercy, it was calculation. Egyptian authorities underestimated him, assuming he was a minor courier in a larger chain. They noted his name in files, then turned attention elsewhere. For Ahmed, this dismissal was a gift, almost invitation. He grew bolder. By 1994, Israeli patrols intercepted convoys tied to his networks. Once, near Kerem Shalom, soldiers discovered false compartments in water tankers concealing rifles. Though Ahmed avoided capture, whispers in intelligence reports began marking him as recurring figure. Smuggling was not only weapons. He arranged forged documents, money laundering routes, and cross-border safe houses. Cairo's police occasionally arrested his couriers, but Ahmed's face remained absent. He cultivated the art of letting others fall, while he slipped quietly into shadows. In 1996, however, he spent 3 weeks in an Egyptian prison after a raid swept dozens of suspects. Official charges cited illegal trade, never naming terrorism. Conditions were harsh, but his silence during interrogations impressed senior Hamas operatives monitoring events. When freed, Ahmed returned sharper, hardened. He spoke less, trusted fewer, and began structuring his networks with redundancies. No shipment relied on a single man. He learned from the arrests. Weakness lay in centralization, strength lay in compartmentalization. By the late 1990s, his reputation had grown in whispered circles. He was the man who could outmaneuver checkpoints, the one whose arrests were temporary interruptions. Law enforcement viewed him as nuisance. Hamas viewed him as rising star. Thus, each brush with authorities, instead of deterring him, sculpted him into a more cautious, more disciplined operator. The early crimes and arrests were not setbacks. They were rehearsals for a larger performance that would soon stretch across continents. Ahmed Khaaki's second major imprisonment came in 1999, when Egyptian authorities, under pressure from Israeli intelligence, swept through Sinai villages. This time, charges were vague but pointed: conspiracy, smuggling, destabilization. He vanished into interrogation cells where sunlight seldom reached. Accounts from fellow detainees described brutal conditions. Prisoners claimed beatings, electric shocks, and sleep deprivation were routine. Ahmed, they said, endured quietly, rarely screaming, often staring silently at walls as if mapping tunnels within his own mind. Rumors circulated that he confessed nothing, revealing neither names nor routes. His silence elevated him into myth among militants. Stories painted him as unbreakable, a man who could absorb pain without yielding secrets. Reality may have been murkier, but myths spread faster. Upon release 2 years later, Ahmed re-emerged thinner, slower to speak, yet more venerated. Some comrades noticed he now limped slightly, perhaps from mistreatment. Others claimed the limp was exaggerated, a disguise to appear weaker than he truly was. Whether torture broke or emboldened him remains uncertain. What was undeniable? Prison transformed him. No longer just smuggler, he was now hardened operator, a man convinced that survival required not only secrecy, but also absolute psychological endurance. Following his release in 2001, Ahmed Khaaki no longer lingered in the margins. Hamas operatives welcomed him back not merely as courier, but as seasoned survivor. He was inducted into more structured cells, where his logistical genius could be fully harnessed. He became instrumental in coordinating between Gaza-based commanders and Sinai smugglers. Ahmed excelled at bridging distrust between militant ideologues and tribal traders. With patience and bribes, he converted Bedouin skepticism into loyalty, creating arteries that bypassed Egyptian scrutiny. But Hamas was not his only network. In Cairo, Ahmed quietly cultivated ties with smaller Islamist factions, some with tenuous connections to the Muslim Brotherhood. He offered them logistics expertise in exchange for safe houses, documents, and discreet financial channels. By 2003, he effectively operated a semi-autonomous wing of smuggling operations. Though nominally under Hamas's umbrella, many routes bore his stamp alone. Allies referred to his operations as al-Khaaki lines, a term reflecting both his surname and his obsession with order. This expansion brought him into Iran's orbit. Tehran's emissaries noted his reliability and precision. In one secret meeting in Damascus, Ahmed reportedly impressed handlers with detailed tunnel blueprints, earning their trust as a logistical bridge to Gaza's militants. His rise, however, drew scrutiny from Egyptian intelligence. They monitored his visits to Cairo hotels, his sudden influx of money, his discreet meetings with men carrying Lebanese or Syrian passports. Surveillance thickened, though Ahmed often slipped away before traps closed. Within Hamas, he was no longer background figure. He advised on timing of shipments, coordinated diversions, and occasionally mediated disputes over territory. His calm demeanor gave him unusual authority, even when speaking before fiery commanders far more famous. Thus, the former messenger boy of Rafah became architect of networks. By the mid-2000s, Ahmed Khaaki was indispensable, a man whose hands never fired a rocket, yet whose fingerprints appeared on every shipment that allowed one to launch. By 2005, Ahmed Khaaki's smuggling empire matured. Weapons shipments grew larger, no longer rifles in hidden crates, but entire consignments of missiles dismantled into parts. Each delivery reassembled in Gaza's tunnels, feeding arsenals that gave militants longer range and greater devastation. Soon, his operations stretched beyond weapons. He arranged the smuggling of engineers, Iranian and Lebanese specialists, who trained militants in rocket assembly. Each arrival in Gaza carried consequences measured in Israeli military briefings and regional balance sheets. Khaaki's involvement deepened further. Intelligence reports linked him to kidnappings of rival smugglers who refused allegiance. Some vanished entirely in Sinai sands, Bedouin elders whispered that Ahmed ordered their disappearances, preferring loyalty enforced by fear rather than negotiation. By 2006, Israeli hostages became bargaining chips. Though never publicly credited, whispers suggested Khaaki helped move captives across Sinai routes. Each abduction inflamed headlines, while his fingerprints remained invisible, hidden behind layers of intermediaries and deniability. Killings followed. Rivals suspected of leaking to Egyptian intelligence were discovered executed, their bodies dumped in desert trenches. Though unproven, patterns pointed toward his networks. Ahmed cultivated an aura. Deals with him meant profit. Betrayal meant disappearance. These escalations elevated his standing within Hamas. He was not simply facilitator but enforcer, ensuring discipline within networks. His dual role, supplier and judge, made him indispensable. Leaders in Gaza relied on his ruthlessness as much as his precision. For Israel, his name climbed higher in intelligence reports. Each rocket barrage during 2007 conflicts was traced back through smuggling lines that bore his mark. Khaaki's escalation had moved him from nuisance to prime architect of regional destabilization. By late 2000s, his legend had shifted. No longer pigeon keeper of Rafah, he was the desert's shadow broker, smuggler, kidnapper, executioner. His rise was violent, deliberate, and, for Mossad, intolerable. In March 2003, Egyptian police seized 2 trucks near Ismailia. Hidden beneath sacks of onions were crates of rifles bound for Rafah. The drivers confessed under duress, naming Ahmed Khaaki as organizer. Yet Ahmed vanished days before raids, leaving investigators frustrated. On July 14, 2004, Israeli forces intercepted a fishing boat off Gaza's coast. Beneath false flooring, commandos uncovered missile parts labeled as mechanical tools. Intelligence reports traced the shipment through Sinai routes coordinated by Khaaki, confirming his maritime reach. In November 2005, Cairo security services raided apartments in Nasser City. Arrested militants carried forged Syrian passports, later linked to Ahmed's networks. The documents bore his familiar hallmarks: serial numbers carefully filed away, pages subtly altered, impossible for casual detection. By August 2006, during Lebanon's war, shipments increased dramatically. Ahmed supervised convoys disguised as aid trucks, carrying rockets from Sudan into Sinai. Bedouin escorts ensured safe passage. Mossad analysts later identified these specific shipments as providing Hamas its first Iranian-made Fajr rockets. On May 2, 2007, Egyptian intelligence arrested 2 couriers transporting explosives near Suez. Both men insisted they worked independently, but receipts in their pockets carried coded numbers traced directly to Khaaki's notebooks. It was one of the few times his paper trail surfaced. In January 2008, rival smugglers were kidnapped near Rafah. Weeks later, their bodies were found shot execution style. Egyptian press hinted at tribal vendettas. Yet regional intelligence reports quietly attributed the killings to Khaaki's orders, consolidating his control over fragmented desert routes. By October 2008, Israeli drones shadowed a convoy across northern Sinai. Missiles destroyed several vehicles, but Khaaki was not present. Survivors whispered he had changed cars at the last moment, a maneuver that reinforced his reputation for uncanny survival instincts. Each incident layered his legend: failed arrests, intercepted shipments, assassinated rivals, all pointed toward a man whose fingerprints were everywhere, yet whose face remained elusive. These step-by-step episodes charted his rise from courier to phantom kingpin of smuggling corridors. By 2009, Ahmed Khaaki's name circulated in international intelligence briefings. No longer buried in footnotes, he appeared in bold type. Mossad analysts referred to him as the artery. American reports labeled him logistical enabler. Egypt branded him a destabilizing force in Sinai. Israel formally placed him on its clandestine most wanted list in late 2008. The designation meant every conversation, every transaction, and every trip outside Gaza would be watched. Satellites tracked convoys. Drones hovered longer over Sinai dunes. His anonymity had expired. Interpol never issued a public red notice, but regional networks exchanged alerts under diplomatic cover. European airports quietly flagged his aliases. Syrian and Iranian handlers instructed him to restrict travel. Each move carried risk. His survival became a countdown. Egypt intensified pursuit. His operations embarrassed Cairo, undermining claims of sovereignty. Secret police compiled dossiers with grainy surveillance photos of him entering Cairo hotels. His ability to outmaneuver checkpoints enraged officials who feared their desert slipping entirely into militant control. For Hamas, his rising notoriety was double-edged. On one hand, he symbolized ingenuity. On the other, his visibility threatened networks that relied on invisibility. Commanders debated whether he had become liability, a marked man whose shadow endangered broader operations. American intelligence flagged him too. Pentagon briefings described his networks as transnational smuggling enterprise with military implications. Washington did not prioritize him like high-profile bomb makers, but acknowledged that his shipments translated directly into rocket-striking Israeli civilian centers. Iran, conversely, shielded him. Tehran's Revolutionary Guards admired his discipline. They funneled resources through him, dismissing warnings from Hamas leaders about his exposure. To Iran, Ahmed was irreplaceable. To Mossad, he was an overdue target painted in bright red. Media caught only fragments. Occasional leaks described an Egypt-based Hamas smuggler. But no photo accompanied articles, no interview surfaced. The paradox strengthened his myth. Famous enough to be hunted, obscure enough to remain faceless. In intelligence corridors, his profile grew heavier. He was no longer seen as courier but strategist, kingpin, facilitator of regional instability. His name moved up lists, closer to lines where policy transformed into assassination. Thus, by the time he checked into Cairo's Ramses Hilton in February 2009, Ahmed Khaaki was no longer a shadow. He was a marked figure, already sentenced invisibly by states that operate in silence, planning only how and when. The first credible attempt on Ahmed Khaaki's life came in October 2006. Driving near Rafah, his convoy was ambushed by gunfire from unknown assailants. Officially attributed to tribal disputes, whispers insisted it was a joint Israeli-Egyptian sting. Ahmed escaped unscathed, reinforcing his legend. In December 2007, a car bomb detonated outside a Cairo apartment he occasionally used as safe house. The blast killed 2 couriers but missed him by hours. Egyptian police blamed criminal rivalries. Intelligence files, however, quietly marked Mossad involvement with coded certainty. By mid-2008, Israeli drones tracked his movements relentlessly. One strike near Al Arish obliterated 3 vehicles in a fiery desert plume. Yet Ahmed had switched cars minutes earlier, using decoys. Survivors later joked he carried invisible maps predicting missiles in advance. Another attempt surfaced in Damascus. In July 2008, he fell violently ill after a discreet dinner with suspected Iranian intermediaries. Hospital tests suggested poisoning. He recovered slowly, convinced the food had been laced. Whether Mossad or rivals orchestrated it remains unresolved. Egypt also tried indirect pressure. Arrests targeted his lieutenants designed to isolate him. In September 2008, one deputy died under interrogation, sparking rumors Ahmed was next. Still, he evaded capture, weaving through Cairo streets like a ghost cloaked in taxis. Some attempts bordered on cinematic. Israeli commandos allegedly staged a mock traffic accident outside Ismailia, intending to trap his vehicle. Reports claimed Ahmed spotted the ruse instantly, rerouting through alleys. Official records never confirmed it, but intelligence chatter preserved the tale. Each failure heightened urgency. Mossad's leadership grew impatient. Tel Aviv demanded results, framing Khaaki's survival as national embarrassment. Analysts warned every missed chance allowed him to move another shipment, each rocket extending shadows of war across southern Israel. For Hamas, the pressure was visible. Some leaders feared association with him invited collective punishment, yet others glorified his survival, branding him invincible. Songs circulated in Gaza, verses praising his escapes as proof divine providence shielded their cause. American analysts noted with interest. Failed assassination attempts revealed intelligence gaps, miscalculations in timing, reliance on faulty informants. Washington briefings concluded, eliminating Khaaki would require precision, deception, and patience exceeding routine counter-terror operations. Thus, by late 2008, assassination attempts were no longer isolated incidents. They formed a campaign, each failure sharpening resolve. The hunt for Ahmed Khaaki became not just mission, it became obsession, where inevitability loomed heavier with every breath he took. By early 2009, Ahmed Khaaki's life resembled a ticking clock. Each hotel check-in, each border crossing, carried the scent of finality. His enemies circled tighter, while his allies whispered doubts, sensing proximity to an end none could prevent. Surveillance thickened invisibly. Phone lines clicked faintly, shadows lingered outside cafes, foreign faces checked into hotels he frequented. He pretended indifference, but comrades noticed. His laughter diminished, his movements slowed. He behaved like a man already rehearsing for martyrdom. Even Hamas commanders grew uneasy. Meetings ended with tense silences, as if his presence carried contagion. They admired his discipline, yet worried his visibility endangered them all. Behind closed doors, some even suggested retiring him quietly, sparing network's broader collapse. For Mossad, the calculus shifted from opportunity to inevitability. The question was no longer if, but when. Precision timing mattered. His death must be clean, deniable, surgical. Plans accumulated like blueprints, each rehearsal narrowing the margin for error. Thus, Ahmed Khaaki walked Cairo's boulevards like a ghost in waiting. He carried pigeons in memory, maps in notebooks, and death in his shadow. Inevitability hung over him like smoke, promising that the hunter's patience would soon reach conclusion. The hunters arrived in Cairo like ghosts in tailored suits. February 2009, flights trickled in from European hubs, Zurich, Vienna, Rome. Each operative carried passports with names borrowed from strangers, faces altered by subtle surgeries, identities woven from bureaucratic smoke. They landed at different hours, never as a group. One appeared as French businessmen attending trade fairs, another as Canadian tourists sketching pyramids, a third as South African consultant with folders of fake contracts. Their cover stories rehearsed like theater. At customs, they moved with calculated normalcy. Bags contained ordinary clothes, toiletries, perhaps a guidebook. Hidden within, however, were specialized tools, lockpicks disguised as pens, microcameras embedded in chargers, coded communications tucked into paperback novels. Hotels across Cairo welcomed them unknowingly. Operatives checked into mid-tier establishments near Zamalek, Garden City, and downtown. They scattered deliberately, ensuring no two passports linked by location. Yet all were within short drive to Ramses Hilton, their true stage. Each carried a fragment of the operation, never full picture. Compartmentalization was doctrine. One controlled surveillance, another handled entry, a third specialized in pharmacology. Only a few held knowledge of final act, an invisible choreography written by Mossad handlers abroad. Meetings occurred in cafes, embassies, or crowded markets. A glance at newspaper headlines, a folded napkin, a misplaced coin, all subtle signals of synchronization. Cairo bustled unaware, never realizing the city was theater for an imported script of assassination. Meanwhile, Mossad headquarters monitored from afar. Secure channels relayed satellite imagery, intercepted phone chatter, Egyptian police schedules. Every detail mattered. Traffic flows, hotel staffing, weather reports. Precision required omniscience, and omniscience required layers of watchers above the watchers. Thus, by mid-February, Cairo hosted strangers with ordinary faces and extraordinary purposes. They walked among tourists and traders, but their true task was singular: to erase Ahmed Khaaki without leaving behind a footprint heavier than cigarette ash. The Ramses Hilton towered above Cairo's Nile Corniche, a magnet for businessmen, diplomats, and tourists. Into this revolving door stepped Mossad operatives under aliases. Each check-in was innocuous, a signature in the ledger, a polite nod, luggage carried without suspicion. One operative claimed to be an energy consultant, another posed as Italian photographer, camera bag filled less with lenses than surveillance gear. A third, a woman, signed in as Canadian academic attending a regional seminar. Their covers layered seamlessly. They requested rooms on different floors, strategically aligned for vantage points. Windows overlooked lobbies, corridors, and entrances. From these perches, micro cameras captured comings and goings, transmitting data through encrypted bursts disguised as ordinary hotel Wi-Fi traffic. Khaaki's own arrival was noted on February 15, 2009. He checked in alone, carrying worn briefcase. Operatives recorded his room number, 814, within minutes. Surveillance tightened instantly. His door discreetly watched, his phone tapped, his movements logged like numbers in ledgers. Inside cafes and lounges, operatives blended with guests. One sipped espresso endlessly, another pretended to read financial newspapers. Their true focus was Khaaki, who he met, what he carried, how long he lingered near phones or elevators. Hotel staff unknowingly assisted. Bribes ensured duplicate keycards, access to maintenance records, and copies of staff rosters. Even cleaners became part of surveillance chain, reporting Khaaki's requests or noting the times he left "Do Not Disturb" signs on his handle. Mossad's Cairo station coordinated quietly, careful not to trigger Egyptian counterintelligence. Each operative knew Egypt's General Intelligence Directorate could be as lethal as their target. One misstep risked transforming hunters into prey. Their bodies vanished into anonymous prison cells. For now, surveillance remained invisible. Khaaki moved unaware through marble corridors, while shadows trailed him silently. The hotel became his cage, each hallway a corridor of observation, each elevator ride a data point feeding into an invisible script of death. February 17, 2009 began unremarkably for Cairo. Vendors filled sidewalks with fruit carts, taxis blared horns, and the Nile rolled indifferently. Inside the Ramses Hilton, however, every movement of Ahmed Khaaki was being tracked with precision, bordering on obsession. At 7:42 a.m., he ordered Turkish coffee from room service, a daily ritual. An operative disguised as waiter delivered it, noting his attire, his briefcase placement, his mood. Data was relayed instantly to surveillance cells scattered across the hotel. By mid-morning, Ahmed exited to meet two men in the lobby. Cameras captured brief handshake, muted conversation. Analysts later identified them as couriers. The meeting lasted 12 minutes, then dissolved. Ahmed returned upstairs, unaware he had been flanked throughout. At 12:30 p.m., he lunched at hotel restaurant overlooking the Nile. An operative sat 3 tables away, posing as solitary businessman. A hidden transmitter beneath the table captured fragments of his phone conversation, coded references to shipments, winter, and blueprints. Afternoon hours passed with him writing notes in his room. Surveillance confirmed minimal activity. For operatives, stillness was gift. Predictable patterns offered predictable windows. By 5 p.m., the kill team finalized positioning, each component now orbiting closer to room 814. At 7:15 p.m., Ahmed phoned Gaza. His tone calm, words clipped. The call lasted 7 minutes. Mossad handlers, monitoring remotely, flagged phrases indicating upcoming shipment schedules. Decision solidified. Tonight was the night. Delay risked his escape, perhaps permanently. By 8:20 p.m., operatives began silent cascade. One woman lingered in hallway with cleaning cart, another monitored elevators, 2 positioned outside emergency exits. Their choreography resembled stage play. Each entrance rehearsed, each misstep rehearsed too, contingencies mapped meticulously. At 9:05 p.m., Ahmed left his room briefly, descending to lobby. He purchased newspapers, scanned headlines, then ascended. His return provided confirmation. Target settled for night. The cage had closed, the stage prepared for final act. At 9:42 p.m., hallway cameras recorded cleaners departing floor. Minutes later, 2 operatives approached room 814. Their movements fluid, deliberate, indistinguishable from weary hotel guests. But behind casual facades, tools waited, and an execution order thrummed in their minds. Thus the day unfolded. Mundane to outside world, yet orchestrated within hotel walls as masterpiece of surveillance. For Ahmed Khaaki, it was final evening alive. his ordinary routines quietly converted into countdown sequence toward engineered silence. The entry method was crafted for invisibility. Operatives carried electronic bypass devices disguised as hotel keycards. With one swipe and faint beep, Room 814's lock yielded silently. No forced entry marks would remain, preserving illusion of natural death. Inside, tools emerged like stage props. Miniature cameras disguised as chargers confirmed room emptiness. Latex gloves eliminated fingerprints. Shoe covers prevented trace evidence. The kill team rehearsed efficiency. Every movement measured, every object touched accounted for in withdrawal plans. Pharmacology was centerpiece. A vial contained fast-acting muscle relaxant, undetectable in routine autopsies. Another held sedatives for control if resistance emerged. Delivery method: hypodermic syringe hidden in pen. One prick, one injection. Body subdued before cries could escape. Surveillance supported entry. Operatives planted jammers to disrupt hotel phones, ensuring Khaaki could not summon aid. Nearby rooms housed disguised agents with laptops feeding encrypted updates, mapping Egyptian police patrols in real time. Precision was maintained through constant invisible coordination. Disguises doubled as tools. A cleaning cart concealed lockpick sets, medical kits, and sound-dampening blankets. Staff uniforms ensured no guest second-glanced them. Mossad doctrine thrived on blending, turning mundane artifacts into lethal accessories of operation. Timing instruments mattered too. Operatives synchronized watches down to seconds. Delays risked Egyptian patrols or random interruptions. The operation unfolded like symphony, each clock tick rehearsed, each movement embedded in predetermined cadence of disappearance. Exit tools awaited. Replacement bed linens masked disturbance. Sprays neutralized DNA traces. Even air fresheners erased chemical signatures. By morning, investigators would enter room not to crime scene, but to illusion. Guest fallen naturally, hotel routine undisturbed. Thus Mossad's arsenal was never bombs or drones alone. It was subtlety weaponized, locks yielding to fake cards, death delivered through medical science, rooms reset into perfection. Their tools left silence where once lived the architect of smuggling corridors. As operatives prepared outside room 814, fate toyed with timing. At 9:47 p.m., a tourist family exited elevator, children running down hallway. The assassins froze, smiling politely, disguises intact. Seconds stretched painfully until laughter faded around corner. Moments later, a cleaner unexpectedly appeared, pushing cart toward Khaaki's corridor. An operative whispered code phrase into earpiece. Within seconds, another agent intercepted her with fabricated complaint about dirty linens, diverting her away before she reached fatal threshold. Inside command suite, tension spiked. Egyptian police patrols shifted earlier than expected, 2 officers lingering outside Hilton entrance. Operatives delayed movement, pretending to browse newspapers in lobby until radioed signal confirmed patrol departure. Every variable required adaptation in heartbeat. Even elevators became hazards. Twice, doors opened unexpectedly, revealing guests. Smiles masked nerves, but hands gripped hidden tools inside pockets. The line between cover and exposure narrowed with every mechanical ding, each moment threatening collapse of meticulously woven facade. Yet fortune favored them. Interceptions held, disguises maintained, timings recalibrated. By 10:03 p.m., hallway was clear, surveillance signals aligned. The operation advanced again, operatives sliding toward room 814's door, carrying silence like weapon, preparing stage for assassination masquerading as natural demise. At 10:07 p.m., the lock yielded without protest. Operatives slipped inside room 814, movements rehearsed and economical. Curtains were drawn tighter, lamps dimmed. The room transformed from guest suite into surgical theater of silence and inevitability. Ahmed Khaaki stirred slightly, surprised by shadows. Before words formed, syringe pierced neck with precision. The muscle relaxant coursed instantly, locking lungs, freezing voice. His eyes widened, recognition dawning, but body betrayed him. Breath halted, limbs slackened, resistance extinguished. Operatives worked swiftly. They positioned him on bed, straightened arms, adjusted shirt. Pulse faded within minutes, masked by sedatives calm. Instruments confirmed no sound carried beyond walls. To neighbors, it was ordinary night in hotel corridor. Finishing touches followed. Briefcase left untouched. Minibar unopened. Bed sheets smoothed with meticulous care. Spray eliminated forensic residue. Scene whispered natural death. A man collapsing alone, another statistic in Cairo's endless hospital registries. By 10:19 p.m., they exited unnoticed. Hallway empty, lobby indifferent. Outside, Nile glimmered against city lights, unaware that history shifted silently in room 814. The hunter's hand had closed, erasing architect of smuggling highways without leaving more than absence. Morning of February 18, 2009, housekeeping knocked on room 814's door. No answer. Hours passed, the Do Not Disturb sign unmoved. By noon, supervisor authorized entry. Inside, they found Ahmed Khaaki lying motionless, face serene, television still murmuring faintly. At first glance, nothing screamed foul play. Bed neat, curtains drawn, no struggle evident. His briefcase rested by nightstand, unopened. Only detail unsettled staff. His eyes half open, frozen mid-expression, as though he had recognized something in final moments. Hotel security summoned Egyptian police. Officers entered cautiously, scanning room. Their initial report cited possible cardiac arrest. Body was transferred discreetly to Cairo morgue. Management urged silence. An international guest dying unexpectedly in Hilton risked scandal-damaging reputation, yet whispers spread quickly. Staff gossiped about late-night strangers lingering in corridors. Guests remembered unusual cleaning carts rolling past midnight. Some recalled seeing a pale foreign man in lobby, always reading newspapers, never leaving. Pieces of puzzle leaked into rumor. By evening, journalists sniffed story. Cairo newspapers published bland headline, "Man found dead in hotel." But intelligence circles already knew better. Ahmed Khaaki's death was no accident. It was trigger for storm about to engulf capitals. At Cairo's morgue, pathologists began routine examination. Initial glance reinforced heart attack theory. No bruises, no cuts, no external trauma. Death seemed natural, an unremarkable statistic in a city where sudden cardiac failure was common cause of demise. Yet inconsistencies soon surfaced. Lungs displayed unusual paralysis, inconsistent with ordinary cardiac arrest. Traces of unfamiliar compounds appeared in blood work. Analysts puzzled. The chemicals degraded rapidly, leaving faint residue difficult to categorize. Suspicion replaced certainty, whispers replacing paperwork. Further microscopic analysis revealed puncture mark hidden beneath hairline at neck. Barely visible, it suggested needle injection. Forensic photographs confirmed the anomaly, sparking immediate questions. Why inject? Who administered it? What substance caused organs to fail silently overnight? Egyptian officials hesitated. Publicly, they upheld narrative of natural causes. Privately, they summoned toxicologists, hoping for clarity. Reports remained inconclusive. Poison suspected, proof elusive. Ambiguity suited some in Cairo, shielding them from responsibility for assassination executed under their roofs. In intelligence backrooms, conclusions formed swiftly. Khaaki had been silenced professionally. Autopsy uncertainty was not failure. It was testament to assassin skill. His death certificate bore bland language, yet between lines, medical examiners recognized invisible hand of covert operation. 2 days after discovery, Egyptian investigators reviewed Hilton's CCTV footage. What began as routine procedure quickly spiraled into revelation. Cameras showed unfamiliar figures haunting corridors. Foreign men and women arriving separately, yet orbiting around one floor, always near room 814. Investigators noted odd consistencies. One man carried identical newspaper each day. Another woman lingered endlessly with cleaning cart. Another guest entered without luggage. None interacted, yet their silent choreography betrayed them. Footage resembled rehearsal for theater rather than casual tourism. Authorities traced check-in records. Passports bore names from France, Britain, Ireland, Canada. Each document appeared authentic, stamped with legitimate visas. Yet deeper analysis revealed forgery. Numbers belonged to real citizens abroad, their identities stolen to cloak operatives. Diplomatic fallout brewed. Foreign embassies protested loudly, insisting passports were genuine. Citizens contacted back home expressed shock, their names, photos, and details manipulated into ghostly doubles. Headlines screamed scandal, amplifying Cairo's humiliation into international stage. Egyptian newspapers published grainy stills from CCTV, faces blurred but haunting. Readers whispered conspiracies, Mossad fingerprints unmistakable. Governments denied involvement, but silence in Tel Aviv roared louder than words. Skilled assassins never admitted authorship. Denial was doctrine, ambiguity their armor. Investigators pressed Hilton staff. Bribed clerks admitted issuing duplicate keycards. Housekeepers recalled unfamiliar guests requesting linens at unusual hours. Each testimony layered narrative of infiltration, yet no suspects remained. Operatives had evaporated, leaving only footage, paperwork, and whispers of surgical conspiracy. For Egypt, scandal was double-edged. On one hand, they appeared victims of foreign incursion. On the other, their sovereignty lay compromised, their premier hotel transformed into execution ground. The CCTV tapes became emblem of humiliation broadcast worldwide. Thus what began as one corpse in hotel bed became sprawling scandal. CCTV revealed ghosts, passports revealed theft, and Cairo revealed fragility. The world glimpsed not murder alone, but blueprint of covert statecraft operating shamelessly across borders. The scandal spread rapidly. Cairo demanded explanations from European governments whose passports had been forged. Ambassadors scrambled, issuing statements of outrage. Publicly, they condemned violations of sovereignty. Privately, intelligence chiefs admitted grudging admiration for the audacity and precision of Mossad's operation. Israel remained silent. Officials neither confirmed nor denied. The absence of denial itself became confirmation. Newspapers filled void with speculation, citing anonymous intelligence sources. Headlines across Middle East branded assassination proof that no border could restrain Tel Aviv's reach. Egypt faced embarrassment. Its premier hotel had hosted a foreign hit team undetected. Parliamentarians thundered speeches about sovereignty. Security chiefs whispered of purges. In smoky cafes, citizens muttered, "If Mossad could kill in Cairo's heart, what else remained secure?" European capitals fumed. Britain demanded explanation after identities of its citizens were misused. Ireland expelled Israeli diplomat quietly. France lodged formal protest. Canada issued travel warnings. Each nation postured publicly, yet behind scenes, cooperation with Israeli intelligence largely continued. For Hamas, the fallout was personal and symbolic. Leaders declared Khaaki martyr, promising retaliation. His funeral in Rafah swelled with thousands, flags waving, chants rising. Yet whispers persisted. How had he been so easily hunted? Suspicion gnawed internally. Iran reacted furiously. State media condemned Israel, accusing Western complicity. Tehran vowed continued support for Hamas, casting assassination as proof of their indispensability. Behind rhetoric, Iranian commanders accelerated shipments, determined that death of one operative not sever artery entirely. Washington walked delicate line. Officially, United States denounced extrajudicial killings. Unofficially, Pentagon analysts exchanged notes of approval, marking Khaaki's removal as tactical gain. The duplicity reflected Washington's paradox: public disapproval, private satisfaction when enemies of allies disappeared. Thus, global fallout spiraled. Diplomatic cables crackled with recriminations, streets with protests, morgues with unanswered questions. Ahmed Khaaki's corpse became political symbol, his assassination echoing far beyond hotel walls into embassies, alliances, and calculations of power stretching from Cairo to Washington. Behind every assassination lies not only operatives but bureaucracies, silent offices humming with fluorescent lights. The decision to erase Ahmed Khaaki was not whispered by lone spy master. It was processed through memos, approvals, committees disguised as routine administrative briefings. Mossad's shadow bureaucracy operated like invisible empire. Analysts drafted dossiers, Lawyers debated deniability. Clerks filed travel expenses under innocuous codes. A death order disguised itself as logistics request, buried in paperwork signed without fully acknowledging what signature enabled. Funding flowed through shell companies, accounts in Cyprus, cash couriers in Athens. Each dollar traced backward to taxpayers unaware their money-financed tools of surgical silence. Bureaucracy sanitized blood into spreadsheets, transforming assassination into budget line approved annually. Even Egypt possessed phantom machinery. Reports delayed, files misplaced, surveillance overlooked. Perhaps incompetence, perhaps complicity. Either way, agencies operated like shadow states, accountable not to citizens, but to whispered calculations of power, survival, and plausible deniability. Diplomats played roles too. Every protest, every denial, every carefully worded press release was choreography orchestrated by bureaucrats, smoothing rough edges of murder. Death became policy, and policy became language stripped of human fingerprints. For operatives, bureaucracy was unseen master. Missions were justified not by morality, but by signatures. They killed because paperwork demanded it, because faceless committees pressed rubber stamps far from Cairo's neon glow. Thus, the phantom bureaucracy emerged as silent empire, its corridors sterile, its decisions lethal, its legacy etched not in monuments but in hotel rooms where history collapsed without warning. They were nameless in newspapers, faceless in courts, yet within Mossad they carried code names: Falcon, Lyric, Echo. Each belonged to Kedon, the unit whispered like ghost story across intelligence circles, trained to kill and vanish without ripples. These operatives lived double lives. One morning they posed as accountants balancing ledgers, by evening, assassins balancing syringes. Their passports, accents, even smiles were weapons, crafted, rehearsed, deployed like blades sharper than steel, yet infinitely more forgettable. Their doctrine preached invisibility, no tattoos, no quirks, no traces. They blended into airports, elevators, hotel lobbies. Legends described them as shadows, who pass beside you in corridors, leaving only faint scent of cologne and untraceable silence. Their arsenal extended beyond guns. They mastered pharmacology, electronics, disguises. A toothbrush could hide fiber optic camera, a magazine conceal lockpicks, a pen deliver poison. Tools mattered less than adaptability. Their weapon was ability to improvise seamlessly under pressure. To intelligence peers, Kedon agents were mythic archetypes, executioners without applause, legions without banners. Their legacy whispered in fragments, their names erased by design. They existed only in shadows, yet shaped destinies of men whose deaths altered balance of nations. Long before Cairo, Kedon's legend was forged elsewhere. In 1972, after Munich massacre, operatives hunted Black September members across Europe. Cafe shootings, hotel room bombs, and sudden disappearances stitched tapestry of vengeance, episodes spoken about in whispers, never confessions. In 1981, a car exploded in Beirut, killing Palestinian commander. Locals recalled strangers checking into nearby hotel days earlier, their names later traced to stolen passports. The pattern mirrored Cairo decades later. Bureaucracy cloaked murder, exit routes paved before detonation. Dubai, 2010. Another hotel, another lifeless militant. Mahmoud al-Mabhouh found dead in his room, cause initially unclear. CCTV footage revealed operatives in wigs, tennis attire, false smiles. It echoed Cairo's choreography. Door opened silently, body rearranged, truth hidden behind routine. Operations extended beyond Middle East. In Paris, a scientist working with hostile regime collapsed suddenly in metro station. Autopsy inconclusive, yet diplomats whispered Mossad signature. Patterns repeated. Ordinary day bent into extraordinary silence. Lives erased without courtroom, only rumor. Even failures lingered. In Lillehammer, 1973, mistaken identity led to killing of innocent Moroccan waiter. Agents arrested, trials public, reputations stained. Lesson etched deeply. Invisibility requires precision, for shadows stumble when truth pierces fog. Each mission whispered across agencies like campfire tale. Was it poison, car bomb, bullet, or silence? Often unclear. What mattered was myth. Kaidan existed, always present, always watching, altering fates from behind hotel curtains and unmarked passports. Thus, Cairo was not anomaly. It was chapter in longer saga, echoes reverberating from Munich to Dubai. Every operation left unresolved questions, each question reinforcing legend. A hidden legion sculpting geopolitics from shadows. Behind every shadow operative stood leaders, prime ministers, generals, spy masters, flawed men cloaked in gravitas. They signed off missions with trembling pens, knowing deniability would shield them, yet conscience gnawed faintly in quiet hours of sleepless nights. They fancied themselves gods behind curtains, pulling strings of assassinations across continents. But gods bleed too, haunted by scandals, inquiries, and ghosts of operatives lost. Power masked fragility, decisions masqueraded as destiny. Ahmed Khaaki's death was not merely bureaucratic act. It was reflection of leaders treating mortality like chess pieces, believing themselves puppeteers, blind to truth. Puppets, too, dancing under weight of history's merciless stage. Ahmed Khaaki's body returned to Rafah under heavy security. Thousands flooded narrow streets, chanting martyrdom slogans. His coffin draped in green flags moved slowly, surrounded by militants firing rifles skyward, each shot echoing both grief and defiance across Gaza's skyline. Women wailed from balconies, men raised fists, children carried posters with his blurred photograph. The anonymity that shielded him in life was gone. His face became symbol, printed, sung, and remembered. Death transformed his invisibility into mass spectacle, fueling collective rage. Hamas leaders delivered speeches extolling his discipline, his silence under interrogation, his smuggling genius. They promised continuation of his work, vowing for every artery cut, another shall open. Applause roared, drowning any quiet doubts about failures. In Egypt, response was more discreet. Officials breathed relief that chapter closed, though embarrassed by foreign hands on their soil. Security presence tightened briefly, yet ordinary citizens remained skeptical. If assassins could strike Cairo hotel, what remained untouchable? Immediate impact spread regionally. Israel noted quiet satisfaction. Newspapers there spoke of neutralized threat. Iran thundered condemnation, pledging vengeance. Western capitals issued muted statements. In Rafah, grief hardened into new resolve, funeral transforming into recruitment ground for next generation of militants. The elimination of Ahmed Khaaki created immediate vacuum. His intricate smuggling networks, once tightly orchestrated, fractured into competing factions. Bedouin tribes squabbled over routes. New couriers emerged, but none possessed his discipline. Chaos replaced precision, destabilizing supply chains Hamas relied upon. Israel gained temporary reprieve. Rocket attacks decreased, shipments slowed. Yet intelligence analysts warned victory was fleeting. Smuggling adapted, morphing like desert wind. New figures inevitably rose, learning from Khaaki's errors, crafting methods even harder to intercept. For Hamas, loss was profound. Without his logistical genius, resources dwindled. Political leadership emphasized symbolic strength, but privately admitted dependence on his networks. Attempts to centralize operations stumbled, exposing internal rivalries. Khaaki's absence magnified fragility inside militant hierarchy. Egypt recalibrated strategy. Assassination exposed vulnerabilities in security apparatus, prompting reforms in intelligence coordination. Crackdowns intensified across Sinai, sometimes brutal, alienating local tribes further. Ironically, Cairo's tightening grip accelerated resentment, driving more youth into smuggling networks Khaaki once commanded. Globally, his death reinforced precedent. Targeted killings abroad were viable instruments of statecraft. Intelligence agencies studied Cairo operation as template, clinical, deniable, devastating. The message lingered. No city safe, no border respected, no operative beyond reach of invisible hand. In the end, Ahmed Khaaki's death changed little in grand scheme of geopolitics. Rockets still flew, borders still burned, smuggling adapted. His elimination was ripple, not tide, yet ripples reveal depths often hidden beneath surface calm. What it revealed was machinery of shadows, nations sanctioning killers, bureaucracies cloaking murder as policy, operatives dissolving into anonymity after extinguishing lives. His story stripped illusions, showing world where justice never enters courtroom, only hotel room. Thus history closed another file, stamped, shelved, forgotten publicly. Yet in whispers his death endures, reminder that beneath every treaty and speech lies hidden theater, where truth remains buried in shadows.